So Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 2, on page 1148. And to sum up what we're discussing is just the context to make sure we have the flow right. The Rebbe Rashab is speaking now about the process of how existence comes into being, which in effect is also going to be the process of how we reconnect, how existence reconnects with its source, with the divine. And the process consists of a yesh, ayin yesh, a source, a producer, or atzmus in its full glory. The yesh amiti, yesh anivra is at the other end, is the product, the production. And then there's the process, the production process, creative process, the ayin be'emtza. And the ayin breaks into two, one that relates more to the source and one that relates more to the creation. You know, to put it in using the analogies we've been speaking, it's like the creative energy of the artist that's more closer to him as he's beginning the process of committing to a canvas his vision. So there's the artist himself, and then there's the energy that's flowing from him, the idea, what he's envisioning and everything as he's beginning the process. And then there's how he is, the energy as invested into actually making the images on the drawing the picture on the canvas. So it's like two stages. One is more internal and it's a lot closer to what the spirit of what he wants to communicate. And the second is more about the investment in the actual technical, procedural, and functional elements in creating the art. And then there's the art. So there you have yesh, ayin, and ayin. Two levels of ayin. One closer to the product, and one closer to the producer. Okay. Now, in context of the whole Ayin Beis, the Rebbe Rashab brings it back to the language of rotzen. Because rotzen is, as we've discussed, in Oyer itself, rotzen is the desire for something. So desire creates a connection between the one who's desiring and what he desires. In this case, the creator, the producer, and what he desires. So rotzen becomes this in-between. The rotzen itself, he broke into several levels. Let's say three general levels. One is before the rotzen atzmi, that he calls is completely removed. The ir makiv be'etzem, that has no relationship at all. And as I said, that's like you could say that's not yet a desire even. It's not yet in the form of any active or conscious desire. Then there's a rotzen klali, a general rotzen. He wants to have a house. He wants to have art. And then there's a rotzen prati, the rotzenos pratim, the specific things that he desires to fulfill the rotzen klali. You need to have rotzen prati to bring it into details. And then, of course, there's the details themselves, which we call pnimi, which is the internal energy, the immanent energy within the structure itself. Now, the next step in this, so we have therefore the makif, which is rotzen, there's the form of makif that relates already to the product, to the structure, and there's the level of makif that is removed completely. And it's only called makif because it's removed, not because it relates to. Okay. And now the last thing we learned is how does this all play itself out in Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, pre-tzimtzum energy, essentially, which we know is already a divine emanation. It's already a divine energy that's coming from Atzmus, from the Yesh Amiti. It's the highest levels of Ayin, essentially. But he says the following. I'm just going to sum up what we learned yesterday. He says like this. In Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, he says, there's a level, the Atzmus Ein Sof, like Atzmus HaMakif, Ein Begeder Shaychas Al Elam is B'chlal. Klal. It's not even in the realm of a relationship with existence. It's all within the creator's expression. It's all within, like speaking to himself, so to speak. And then he says in Ein Sof, there are levels before the Tzimtzum too, the Yesh Madregas, Shem B'chinas Shayches Ala Elamis, that have a relationship. Now remember, relationship doesn't mean that the worlds exist yet, and doesn't even mean the worlds have access to it. It means from his point of view, the Eir has now gone to a level that it begins to relate to existence, and he divided that into two levels. Rotzen, Olaber Tzene, it arose in his desire to create, and two, lower than that, is that Yesham Hashara al Elamis, that he actually envisions and allocates resources. Shashir ba'atzmei bekeach, that in his own inner processing, he allocates or allocates, he envisions, I called it envisioning and allocating within himself. This means that there's a relationship as far as the source goes, or using the artist's example, the artist he's already thinking about what the art is going to be like. It's not yet art because there's no tzimtzum yet, but it's already thinking about it. Whereas, so basically we have three levels here. Etzem ha'er, no relationship at all. It's only divine reflection. Rotzen, Oliver Tzene, arose in his desire, and Hashara b'keach, and a type of envisioning and allocation. So then the last thing we learned was like this. Hare, I'll read from here. I'm reading from the line that starts Hashara al Elamis, Kamesh Shir Basme Bekeach, Hare, Gama She'enu B'chinas Shayches Klal Elamis. So what do we see from this? That even that level that has no relationship at all with the worlds. We're talking about Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. And what does he mean by the worlds? He says the Hainu B'chinas HaPnimi has no connection yet. It's not yet manifest. It's not an Eir that is entering into Kalim. It's all still within the Rotzen, within the Eir, within the source, essentially. But it's not yet manifest in Eir B'Kalim, like Esus Sfiris, Eir HaChochma, Klei HaChochma, which is Eir Pnimi. So even on that level, he says, Bo b'b'chinas shayches u b'b'chinas makif ala elamis. So even though a level that's removed and is not yet part of this, there's no structure yet, but even there, it has now, you can say it's manifest in a level that has a relationship and that transcends or encompasses or relates in some way, makif ela elamis. Now, we read this yesterday quickly. I'm just going to read a little slower and more explain a little more. He says, because now you could say, 1 second, maybe the Ur Makif, or the Ur as it is in its own natural state, has no relationship with the world. And what makes the relationship? The Ur Pnimi. At some point, God wants an Ur Pnimi, an Ur that will enter into the structure, will energize, to use the example of the human body, not just Etzem HaNefesh, that gives life to the whole body equally. Remember, we learned that the whole body is equally life, whether it's from the head to the toenail, whether it's Eig Melech HaBoshen, whether it's a giant or a child. The life force of the soul is equal. But then there's a life force that enters and energizes each faculty. Chochmah is not like Bina, and Moichin is not like Midas, and each part of the human being, using the human example, has its own particular structure, his own particular parameters, and the Eir is tailored toward those parameters. That's called the Eir Pnimi. Eir Makiv is a overall overarching energy, not one that's specific or localized. So he's saying, you're telling me what we said earlier, that also Seviv, there's also elements of relationship to the worlds. Why can't you just say it's coming from the Eir Pnimi? At some point, the Pnimi comes into play. So he's saying like this, V'zeh ef shalemer, This relationship that makif, which on its own is removed from existence, is now beginning to relate through desire or through the shir asme b'keich. He says, you can't say it's mitzad apnimi. Because we're in a state now that there's no relationship to pnimi. There is no pnimi yet. So you can't say this relationship that it has is coming mitzad apnimi. Remember, earlier we learned on the top of the page that after the tzimtzum, the igulim come through the kav. So there the makiv comes through the pnimi. So therefore, the transcendence comes through the pnimi. He says, yesh leimer, that's why there's chilukim adregis. There's a structure to some extent, there's some distinction, even in Seviv Kalam, even in the makiv. That's due to it traveling through the kav, as I explained it then. Here he's saying there's no pnimi yet. There's no shachas ta pnimi because there is no pnimi. There's no kav. There's no pnimi. So he says, so therefore, we can't say that this relationship is due to the pnimi is dika'er. Okay, so we're left here we still have to understand when does the pnimi begin? If you may remember, back in volume 1, he said there's the thing called the 10 hidden spheres. The 10 hidden spheres is the root for the 10 revealed spheres. The 10 spheres have a makiv to it, but they also have a pnimi to it. So therefore, it says there, if you remember, Shir Asme B'Koyach was like the artist who can do infinite amount of art is now determining exactly what piece of art he's going to create now. In the language of creation, that God in infinite possibilities, infinite spheres ein ketz, or even beyond spheres altogether, could have gone many directions, is now Shir Asme B'Koyach. He's now envisioning and saying it's going to be 10 spheres. Now, why are they called hidden spheres? Because there's nothing there yet. It's all his own envisioning. So it's called hidden, as we learned. It's not hidden as in behind the wall, hidden and we just can see it. We can just not reveal to us. Fundamentally, it's still in an amorphous. It's still in a it's in a very primal state, meaning as it's envisioned by the Creator. So, if you recall, that was what if I recall correctly, in the beginning of close to the beginning of Ayin Beis, he said that's how the Er Makif envisions the Er Pnimi, because the Er Habligvul is envisioning one approach. So it's still part of Bligvul because it's all part of the artist's possibilities, but he's already determining and envisioning and allocating one of infinite possibilities. So yes, it's a piece of infinity, it's a piece of Bligvul, but it's already the beginnings of the Er Pnimi. So I'm wondering, and it probably will be explained now. So then we say like this: there are levels before Shir Atzme B'Keich. We know the Etzem Ha'er is shapeless and defined and undefined and seamless, like he said, completely removed from the structure. Like the artist before he's even knows he's an artist, but definitely before he's envisioning any art. Okay, that's fine. There's no connection. Then he says there's Ola B'Ritzeinei, he desires, he wants it. In the muscle of the artist now wants to create art. And then there's what type of art? He's envisioning the exact specific details. Now, what he's saying now, he says all this is not Mitzad HaPnimi, because there is no Pnimi. He doesn't have a Shaykhus to Pnimi yet. It's all within himself. God's beyond being, the divine energy that's beyond existence doesn't yet relate to existence. And then it manifests in stages that begin to relate. But he's saying clearly it's not Mitzad HaPnimi. So you have to say that the fact that the artist envisions one type of art, or in this case, that God's envisioning 10 spheres, Shir Atzme B'Keich, is not due because there's a Pnimi there. There's no Pnimi. It's because the Bligvul of the Makif wants to now manifest in a specific aspect. You could say, like in other words, if you have one piece of Bligvul, it's still Bligvul. It's just one piece of it. So that's what we learned in the volume 1, that the essential structure of existence begins not in a place of structure, it begins in a place of no structure and no relationship. In the no relationship, it then manifested itself in one of the aspects of it. Now, why is this so vital? Because then you can say that even though the artist is only creating one piece of art, in this case, 10 spheres, within it really is embedded all the infinite possibilities. He's just not revealing them. But when you look at the art, it's not just he created art and is disconnected from all his other potential, but it's actually a piece of that potential that has now been actualized. Just pointing out how to understand this process here. But I think it's going to be clear what we learn now. I just wanted to give a little context here. Was it clear what I said?
The Atmos, according to your explanation, everything is reaching not the Atmos. Is the other layers?
We're not talking about Atmos now. We're not talking about Atmos. We're talking about Ein Sof. Not discussing. Atmos was discussed a few pages back. That's built in Metzias Nimsa. We're talking about Ein Sof now. Lifnei HaTzimtzum. So we're not talking about Atmos right now.
Rabbi Jacobs,
oil from Atmos.
Rabbi Jacobs, you said that he targets one type of expression that carries with it all the other possibilities. Is that what you were saying?
That if it's a piece of Bligvul, then from the point of view, yes, from the point of view of God, it means the artist invests his entire being in one art. You only see 10 spheres, but the 10 spheres ultimately can lead you, and if you retrace the steps, back to the Bligvul. Yeah, that's what I said.
Okay, good. I'm going to just got it straight. Thank you.
If you want to know where I'm referring to, just for the record, I would definitely recommend you go there. If you go back, I'm going back now to volume 1. Volume 1, I think it's chapter, maybe Tazai, 1 second. Maybe chapter 16.
Ooh, thank you. I'm trying this one, huh?
Nobody remembers? We learned it only 7 years ago. I think it's later. 1 second.
The oil,
the pages between 20 and 40. 25, okay.
The oil Ein Sof is Retzoini. So what that means?
I didn't say no. Ein Sof is not Retzoini. Retzoini is within Ein Sof. There's a level called Ratzon.
So that no, I'm talking about the oil Ein Sof is Retzoini from the Atmos. It's not
no, it's not. That's not correct. I'm correcting you. It's not correct. Ein Sof is higher than Ratzon. Ratzon Oliver Retzoini is within Ein Sof.
I understand, but Atmos is not Mochach in the oil Ein Sof. So it's not a Mochach. He wanted. That means something in Atmos wanted the oil Ein Sof.
What's your point?
My point is, Atmos is above all of these things. How is this possible?
Exactly. That's why we don't call it Ratzon. You can't. There's no Ratzon in Atmos. Atmos is not defined by Ratzon.
But normally, oil is coming by itself. The Shemesh has no choice if it should be oil.
How is this relevant? This is a good question, but it's not relevant at all to this mimer. Are you aware of that?
No, because we're talking about everything.
No, one second. I made a statement. Are you aware that what you're asking is discussed in Chassidus, and we discussed it earlier last mimer, but it's not relevant at all to what we're discussing here. I just want you to know that.
Okay.
So I'm happy to discuss about something else, but I want everybody to understand you're not asking pshat on this page here.
Yeah, but this is a opportunity to Yelamdeinu Rabbeinu.
Yeah, but let me put it this way. When you start talking one Masechta and a different Masechta, you end up not understanding any of them. So I have no problem discussing this, but it's independent of this page. This goes back to, if you go back to the last Maimer and Tzadik Dalet, he discussed at length if you can call Atzmus a Ma'ir, right? Whether you can call Atzmus a source. And he made it very clear you can't. Are you asking me how from Atzmus becomes Eir? Is that the question you're asking?
Yes.
Why is that a question? Do you have Atzmus has any Hagbolas? He can't manifest an Eir if he wishes to.
But he's above this.
So what?
Atzmus
So he's
has no
above it, and he
shaykhs to oil.
chooses to express himself. Well, Atzmus is above it, but he's not above not expressing himself either. He can express if he wants to. I'm not sure what you're asking me. You're asking a question like this. He's above creation, but he decided to create. Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu, he had a desire. He wants to create existence. Of course he's above existence, but that doesn't mean he can't want existence and create it. Where do you get the concept? Because he's beyond it, he can't do it?
No, the wanting is already means that he needs. So that's the Nisava.
No. That's what you just said. He needs. I know. Where does it say he needs anything? First of all, I wouldn't even use the word want. I would use the word nesava. But the truth is, you have to. We discussed this at length, and honestly, I don't think it's the place right now to talk about this, because it's just going to confuse what we're learning now. Now, if everybody agrees that we should talk about this, then I will not talk about what we're learning now on this page. It's a whole other discussion, how from Atzmus comes Eir. But I like structure. I like to know what we're talking about. I don't like to mix and conflate everything, put into one big pot. Okay, the page I was referring to is 44. Chapter 27 in Ayin Beis. There he says what I just said. He says these words, Masha Erein Sof Habligvul, Shir Ba'atzmei Hamshach Shebebchinas Gvul. Okay. And there he discusses a lot of what I'm discussing now, which is the different levels of desire and not desire and so on.
What chapter were you
Say
referring
the
to?
following. Atzmus, however the word you want to use, Atzmus, it has nisava, a desire, a taiva, a pleasure, to have a dira b'tachtenim. We'll never understand what that means exactly. So let's get that off the table. Why he desires, says the Alter Rebbe, there's no why, because taiva is higher than akasha. There was no logic yet. He didn't create logic. Erein Sof is the way Atzmus manifests in a Metzias Nimtza. Atzmus remains built in Metzias Nimtza, but he manifests Oyer. Oyer has that paradoxical element. We learned at length. On one hand, it has no identity of its own. Everything it is just a reflection of its source. On the other hand, it is not Atzmus. So you have now what the Alter Rebbe is Mechadish. You can go back. I mentioned this at least 40 times. Vayelech Samach Vov. I guarantee you that probably none of you went to look it up, which means that you want me to do the work for you. So you got to go to Vayelech Samach Vov, and the Alter Rebbe, and I stand corrected if somebody did look it up. Great, I'd be very happy to hear that. That the Alter Rebbe, he explains the Chidush Admur Nish Meseidin Be'inyan Ha'oyer. That Oyer is the method with which God begins the process of Ametzias Nimtza, that ultimately will relate to existence. What we're learning now is that the highest levels do not relate, because they're still just a reflection of Atzmus. And as we go down, Lifnei Atzimtzum, there's Olaber Etzene, and then there's Shir Atzmei B'Kayach. That's what we've learned. And I believe I explained it pretty well. The etzem atzmos is like the etzem of the artist, beyond being an artist, beyond being anything. We're not discussing that right now. That we discussed in the previous Maimer, if you remember the language, mitziusim atzmuse, built to mitzias nimtza, mechuyev hamitzias, that's atzmos, as much as we can say. And even that, we also learned is not all of atzmos. But that is atzmistic language. That refers, only atzmos has those descriptions, so to speak. I don't want to call it description, but those ways of discussing. Now we're talking about Eir. And we just discussed the levels of Eir because he's talking about the Ayin Be'emtza. We discussed the Yesh HaAmiti already. Now we're discussing the Ayin. So now he's going to explain further what this means. Okay?
Is it possible to say that the esospheres, that these esospheres genuzas that are found in our south, is they are still a not a panemi bichlal? Is that what we're saying?
For that, I would suggest you go back to the pages I referred to. He discusses there that question, that precise question.
I'm reading it right.
In what chapters were you?
1 second.
What chapters were you mentioning?
Let me just finish answering the question. He discusses there, is it a pnimi? Is it the sherish hapnimi? That's exact discussion there. Basically, he says there's two parts to it, if you remember. A part that is a bligvuldik part, so it's not a pnimi yet. And there's a part that's beginning to be the root of the pnimi. So essentially both things. That's why he says the kav and the esesfer sagnuzes, what is its relationship? Gilui helam or yesh ma'ayit? Does that jog your memory? So if you go there, that's exact the whole discussion of the first, I would say, I just said page 44, yeah? If you go approximately page 20 through 45, or a little more, discusses exactly this question. What are the esesfer sagnuzes? The reason I'm not going to go over all of that, it's not so, I don't want to go over everything that was learned already. I'm just using enough to be able to understand what he was saying here. Here he's clearly saying that this relationship is not due to pnimi, because makif is not yet related. It says here the makif, it says clearly. But now he's going to explain. Let's be patient. He's going to, next section, he's going to explain this further. Somebody else want to ask something?
Thank you.
What chapter were you referring to? Page 44 in which
Volume
chapter?
1. We are on page now 1148. So page 44 of this series. You have to go back to volume 1. If you don't have volume 1, if you look for volume 1 of what's called the volume 1 of Ayin Beis, page 44, I said, what chapter did I say? 27, chapter 27.
Thank
A long
you.
way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So he says like this now. Ach be'emes. So ach is always a qualification. Ach, however, in truth, Ayin Beis madreges ba'er. These are two levels in Eir. Not sure what the two levels are. We'll see in a second. The Eir she'ena b'chinas shayches klal ela elam is b'chinas Eir ha'atzmi. Oh, okay. The Eir that has no relationship with the worlds. Remember, we started with that. The Eir atzmi, he said, eina begeder shayches ela elam is klal. He says that level, the is called Eir ha'atzmi. It's the core light or the core divine energy. She'ena b'chinas hamshoche ba'atzmei. This is what I was alluding to the other day. It's not even hamshoche ba'atzmei. In other words, it's completely completely intimately connected to the source, and it's not even hamshoche ba'atzmei. He's not yet even in a way aware of it. It would be like the oyer of the etzem neshama. It's there, but it's completely without any manifestation. So you'll say, so what's the role of it? The role is that it's the beginning of a process. It's oyer as Atzmus has manifested and expressed himself now and built him Metzias Nimtza into Metzias Nimtza. That's the best way I would describe it. So you have the, let's call it the quilt I mentioned, the field of energy that has no levels yet, there's no hamshachis yet. It's just a field of energy that is going to become the place where everything else will emerge from. If you need me to explain it more, I can. But I gave yesterday the example, the other day the example that everybody's born with certain talents, but it takes time till they emerge. They can be completely dormant within you, and your etzem nefesh has it, but it's not in any way, any form or shape or anything. It hasn't manifested. It's just there as your nefesh has that capacity to do so. Sometimes this is associated a little with Yechelis ha'atzmus, that God has the capacity. But I would say this is more than Yechelis of Oir. It's actually a form, there is already an Oir. However, it doesn't have any type of definitions and parameters that we can talk about. The only thing we can say, it's not yet even a hamshach with himself. In other words, you can't say that he even has manifested in I want something. So it's Oir. All it is an extension from Atzmus. Atzmus has now extended himself into a new type of state that is not built in Mitzias Nimtza state. Avla Eir ba'atzmai is explaining it further. This Eir on its own, yes, it's not Atzmus, it's Hamshacha min Atzmus, but the Eir itself ain't a b'chinas Hamshacha. It itself is not extending anywhere. It's an extension of Atzmus, but it itself is in its place, and that's it. As I said, a good example would be, well, I gave already a good example, I believe. It means, I'll use the example of the artist. There's the artist as a human being, the etzem artist. But then there's the aspect of him becoming someone who's going to produce something. But he hasn't produced anything yet. He hasn't even envisioned what he's going to produce. He hasn't even desired a production. It's just the fact that he could. He has the capacity. So what's the chiddush? The chiddush is not self-contained, which means he wouldn't even extend himself at all. There is an extension, but it's not yet in any form or shape. So it would be called like the Eir Atzmi of the Nefesh or the Eir Atzmi of Atzmus. So it's a Eir Atzmi, it's a Eir, but it's an Atzmisdik state. So this is Aval Eir Ba'atzmi. The Eir on its own, Eina B'chinas Hamshacha, is not in the form of any extension or expression or transmission. It's not transmitting. It's only reflecting basically the source. The Eina B'chinas Gili Klal. It's not a gili even. You hear that? It's not a gili. She'll say, then what is Eir if it's not a gili? The answer is, as I said, all it is Atzmus manifesting in a state that will become later gili. Right now, all it is just Atzmus manifesting in a state of Mitzias Nimtza. Ub'china zu, and this level, he ikir kol b'atzmus.
It's still called R without anybody or anything receiving that R.
Yeah. I look, I'm going to explain it further. I want to just read the whole phrase. Let's get the whole picture as the Rebbe Rashab says it, and then we'll discuss it at more length. Obviously not going to leave this hanging. This is a very abstract and subtle state, obviously. Because it's not the etzem, mamish, and it's not in any other, it's not a gili or amshacha. So then what is it? Like, it's like saying, is it this, not this, and not that? What is it then? What words can we use to describe it? But you're going to see it's a vital dimension because it's truly the true interface. I'll just, you know what, I'll say one thing that maybe make it a little easier to understand. I mean, we'll just go a little into fantasy land, okay? It's always good to take an exercise in our imagination. Imagine, it's actually a sad imagination, but imagine for a second that human beings, us, could not interact and have a relationship. Let's say we're like stones. Now, maybe stones have a relationship, but let's assume you're a stone and I'm a stone. We can't talk to each other. We can't communicate with each other. We can't feel each other. We can't discuss ideas. Everybody's in their own reality, and that's that. I mean, God could have created a world like that. Obviously, it would be a very sad world and a very different world. But imagine, you're a self-contained entity. You know, now I know I've said this in some classes, and someone says, hey, I think that's how we are as it is right now too. As much as we communicate, it's not really me. I'm communicating ideas or feelings, but my essence, at the end of the day, we all walk home alone, and there's a part of us we can't share with anyone. We can't even share with ourselves. Are we aware of everything we are aware of our essential identities? No. As a matter of fact, someone asked you, do you know your essence of the essence of who you are? You say, well, I mean, a wise person would answer, I know what I know. What I don't know, I don't know. For all I know, there's parts of me I'll never know. And as a matter of fact, you could even say further, there's a part of you that is inexpressible. You know, liba lepuma legalia is an expression. What it said the Lashon? A person can't write. Right. Or a different expression. The deepest parts of ourselves are very hard to express. We don't have words. They're not sufficient. They're not adequate to express ourselves. Even to ourselves. I mean, I'm not talking about a person who's confused and says, I don't really know what I want, or I really don't know how to make a decision. That's on a lower level. I'm talking about even if you're a smart person, self-aware, a lot of introspection, there's definitely parts. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, I know the etzem neshama, I know deep things. I hear a nigun, a song. I hear an idea. I care about somebody. I love my children. I have relationships, the things I'm connected to. And they're very deep. They're not superficial. They're not just like taking a walk or eating a piece of food. They're deep expressions. But can you say it's your etzem neshama? How do I know? Maybe it's a manifestation of my etzem neshama. My point that I'm making is that if you really start talking about an etzem mamish, an etzem is not really describable. You can describe that I was touched deeply, came Yom Kippur by Ne'ilah, and my soul opened up, Yechidah Shebenefesh, and I felt I'm ready to do Mesiras Nefesh, like the Shalah writes there at the end of Ne'ilah. I'm completely committed. And other times in the year that a person may be in that place, a day of a simcha, marrying off a child, when a child is born. I mean, we all have had very profound experiences. But if someone said to you, you'll say, that's the closest I've experienced etzem. That's what you could say. But Chassidus talks about etzem and neshama. Is that my etzem, or is it what I experienced of my etzem? My point I want to make is that etzem is really off limits, to be honest. Nobody's ever seen it. Nobody can describe it. But we know it's there because everything has to start from somewhere. So as soon as you're aware of it, you're already a step outside of it, because awareness makes you. I always give the example that right now, wherever you are, here, listen to this. What is your left leg doing? So until I said those words, you weren't thinking about your left leg or your right leg. Now you are. So you say it's under the table. I feel it. It's on the floor. It's hanging. Whatever it is. Why did you not? Where was it before you were aware of it? Was it there? Of course it was there. So awareness is an expression of presence. It's not the definition of presence, because something could be present and you're completely not aware. There could be, in other words, your etzem is there all the time. That doesn't mean you need to be aware of it. So awareness and consciousness and expression and definition, these are all what we would call oyed. That's oyed hanefesh. Just to explain what oyed is. So oyed is expression. Now, in oyed itself, you could ask, 1 second, okay, if oyed is expression, so why is he saying here no gili and no hamshach? Because if oyed is coming and being megala something and being nimshach, you could imagine just like there's an etzem that you can't see or identify, but you know it's there because everything comes from there. So he's saying there's also an oyed that you can't see or identify, that is first what can I call a field of energy, a blank, seamless, shapeless field of energy that has no expression, has no revelation, but it is step 2. So there's etzem and there's etzem ha'oyer. And after that is when we can start describing and saying, now that that's in place, this etzem ha'oyer is going to turn into a gili and hamshacha, a rotzen, shiras mebekayach, whatever happens. So basically, it's really a logical argument that if you see light that's revealed, You have to say there's a state of light that's not revealed, because where did it come from? So basically, you're saying if I see something, it means there's a source. That source is Etzem Ha'ir, and the source of Etzem Ha'ir is the Etzem itself. That's essential way of describing this level. Now, he may say more. I just wanted to say this because I realized by reading it, it just becomes just words, and you must explain what it means. So this is somewhat of an explanation. Basically, it's recognizing the forces that are beneath the surface of the forces that we can identify to some extent. So if someone said to you like this, I got married, built a home and a family, I built a family, and then when I was 25 years old, or 28 years old, or 30 years old, 35 years old, it doesn't matter what age, I decided we must have our own home. Enough renting, I'm going to build my own home. Build, buy, whatever it is. We know the Gemara says in Yuvamis, Ein Adam b'loi bayis. The Gemara says b'loi karka, Tosfos says b'loi bayis, that a person is not complete without a home. So it's not just a place of shelter because you want to protect yourself from the rain and the snow, or from the elements, or from hostility or thieves and so on. No, there's a certain, you say, a beautiful home expands a person. It's a certain completeness. Exactly what I said the other day that about Ein Adam b'lo Isha. It's not an external thing.
Einoi Adam.
Yeah.
Adam b'loi bayis, einoi Adam. And b'loi Isha oich.
Okay. It's not complete because it's part of who we are essentially. Now, let me ask you a question. Until the moment that you fell in love and got married, until the moment you built a home or wanted to build one, where was that part of, where was it inside your nefesh? Or going back to the mashal of the artist wakes up one day, I'm going to create art. So you'll say, did it all begin this morning? No, it's a process that goes back to stages that I don't even recognize when it began. If you're really honest and trace most of the things that you have true, I'm not talking about superficial, real things you care about, you can trace it to a point where it began, but you can't trace it in your nefesh. How far back can you go? We don't remember what we were, we don't know what's going on in our nefesh when we're born. My point is the expression, if it's so profound and connected to you, you have to say, it's not just what you see and experience. Behind the scenes, there's all kinds of forces at work. And what he's saying is it all the way goes back to your etzem and to your etzem ha'ir. Things that are not yet in a state of hamshacha, then they come into a state of hamshacha. The reason it's difficult to wrap our head around this, let's be honest, you know why? Because we are not people of etzem. We're not atzmizdika people. We're hispashtizdika people. We are people of expression. Someone will say to you, yes, it's very nice you have it in the essence of your soul, but I only relate to something I see, I hear, I see some expression. And it's true. From a point of view of Avodah, you can't just say I'm a good Jew at heart. There has to be some behavior. But fundamentally, anything of behavior is already an expressive element. We are just very accustomed to that world. So the first thing we say is if someone says, there's etzem ha'oyer right now in this room, you'll say, where is it? I don't see it. But you know what? Since when is your sight and your experience defines reality? So we're not accustomed to realities that we do not relate to. But if you think about it with seichel, obviously anything that you see here must have been at a stage before that. Let me ask you a question. You see a big tree in a garden. Tree, you see a tree. Everybody understands the tree didn't come from nowhere. The tree was once a smaller tree. It was once a little sapling. And it started with a seed. So if you didn't know better and someone says this seed is where this big tree started from, you'll say, where did the seed come from? Well, the seed came from a previous tree. And you start going back, you may not know the beginning of everything, but you know there has to be a source. The fact that you could identify a source, that's great. But how often can we not identify a source? And that's the key here to understand. We talked about neshama. Remember, we learned about the neshama, the soul, that we only know about the mitzias, the existence of the soul, not the muhus of the soul. Why? Let me just finish. Why don't we know about the muhus of the soul? because we're not neshama people. We are tangible people. We relate to tangible things. So we could say the following. I see, Rahman al-Islam, the difference between a guf, a corpse, and a live human being. What the briskers say that a mess is that a gavra became a chefza. So when you see something that is not alive, you realize there must be a life force. Now, what do we know about this life force? A little, we know a little. We know it gives life. We know it brings alive all your faculties. You know, however you define life. Now you start traveling. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida, etzema neshama. We barely can scratch the surface of nefesh. What do we even know about the brain, the human mind? How much do we know? My point here is not to say that we're limited. My point is that we can identify some expression that there must have been a state before it was expression. Chassidus talks a lot about it with the keiches. When I sit down and write, or any type of physical, any type of faculty that you're using, the power of your sight. When I start writing, is this my koyach haksiva, or is the power of writing far more than what I'm actually writing on paper? So it's obvious that before you write, you have the power to write. The power to write is far more unlimited than the writing. So we go, koiches hagluyim means the expressive faculty. Koiches hanalomim means the potential faculty. That, like, for example, there's a lot more things I can write that I haven't written yet. Then there's koiches hayulim and koiches atzmim, and then there's nefesh neise koiches, etc. What are we doing here? From the expressive faculty, we're discovering there must be a potential faculty. You can't have actual without potential. And potential means it must be coming from a deeper place. And the further back you go, the less tangible it is, but it's clearly there, because if it's in a revealed place, it must be in a concealed place. If you see water coming out of the ground, you can rest assured it's coming from somewhere. Now, you may never identify, like, let's identify water. Water comes from a well. We know the well means that there's deep down the ground, there's springs of water, mayones. You ever see a mayon? No one has ever seen a real mayon. You see the expression of the mayon. If you go further down, where did the mayon come from? So today, if you read science, it says there are layers and layers and layers. As a matter of fact, you go deeper down in the earth, it's heat. It's tremendous heat. So how did heat become water? So you start saying, interesting question, right? So that means there's a whole bunch of layers that even though we see some, we don't see the others. My point is that to really understand these things, you have to appreciate and recognize that what we see as expression is only the surface, the tip of the iceberg of the things that are not expressed, all the way back to an atzmi that defies expression even. But it's already the first step out of atzmus. I hope this helped a bit. But anyway, feel free to ask anything.
But still, when you speak about a tree, you're not speaking about the DNA and the potential of a tree. You're speaking about a tree. Here, he's saying, or what I would have thought is similar to the tree is the expression. Whereas he's saying, no, it's the potential.
Well,
what I would have thought potential.
I think you gave it good. You mentioned DNA. Now, what shapes DNA? What goes beyond DNA?
Yeah, but we call it DNA. We don't call it the tree. We call a tree, we call DNA, DNA.
I was just using the
example.
example.
R is not what I would have thought R is. R is even the Bakayach of R, as B'lashon B'nei Adam.
Well, look, I just gave examples. Not all of them are perfect examples of earlier stages. Obviously, the tree has a limited element, but you mentioned the DNA. DNA, if you ever see DNA, I don't think anybody can see DNA, is definitely a form of energy. And yes, if you go deeper back, obviously here we're talking all the way back to pre-Tzimtzum. So I'm just trying to explain that if you go far back, you're going to get to a point where there's something there, but it's not yet expressed in any possible way. That's mainly what I was trying to say. All these examples are just meant to help us understand that there could be things that we see expression, but it originates in a place of there's no expression. That's what I was saying. So basically, Atzmus is the first beginnings of existence, but it is not yet in any shape and form. All it is, you can say, is God's wanting to begin this process. That's how I would put it. Okay, I see we're ready at 10:30. I think we should stop here. And just remember again, this is talking the highest levels here. We're not talking after the Tzimtzum, which is also hard enough. I told you the Alter Rebbe trembled when he said the word Atzilus. I would wonder what he would do when he's speaking about these levels here. We talk about it easily, so, but the fact of the matter is, these are extremely, what can I say? They're the most abstract levels that are beyond even the Big Bang, because the Big Bang is already a process that begins. So this goes all the way back to how the best way built the Metzias Nimtza manifests the Metzias Nimtza. Listen, we're going to continue to learn it, and we'll try to wrap our heads as much as we can around it. I don't think it's going to come easy because these, as I said, in general, we are people of expression. It's hard to relate to non-expression, but especially here, we're not just talking about non-expression, we're talking about the most profound levels. Like the example I gave from human beings is even our Etzem HaNefesh we can't relate to. We relate to it's some form of expression. But once, as I said, if something can express itself, it means it has to be a state where it's not yet expressed. That's a rule. That is a given. It doesn't come from nowhere. So everything has a state, and ultimately, if you trace it back, the Uyr of the Etzem HaNefesh is not yet a conscious state that you can say, I'm aware of it, I'm expressing it, I'm describing it. All you can say is the beginning of the process. That's all you can say. It's like, as I mentioned before, it's a field of energy through which and upon which everything else will emerge. Okay. Good. No one ever said this is going to be easy. We'll get there. We'll get there. So, anybody want to add anything, or we should sign off? Okay, so we'll stop here close to the bottom. We'll move a little further down, 11:48. And more to come. It's not over yet.